The quiet between trees. It started with a mitten, a small red mitten lying on a wooden bench at the edge of the playground. The snow had just started falling again, thin and quiet, covering the swings and slides in a layer of white dust. Maya Lysenko brushed the frost off the mitten and frowned. She recognized it instantly. It belonged to one of her students, little Danilo, the boy who'd gone missing 2 nights ago after walking home from class. His mother had stood right there at the gate, waiting with a flashlight, but he never made it out of the tree line that bordered the school. The police said it was probably an animal. The town said it was bad luck. But Maya knew better. Ashford Pines had always been a quiet place, too quiet, and the forest that surrounded it always seemed to listen.
Detective Jonah Mercer didn't believe in ghosts. Not anymore. He'd seen too many real monsters, people. That's why he'd left the city after 20 years on the homicide task force. Too many cases, too many faces that followed him home. He thought Ashford Pines, this forgotten little logging town tucked into the North Woods, would be peaceful. But when the sheriff called him out to consult on a strange scene, Jonah found himself standing under tall pines at dawn, breath freezing in the air, staring at a boy's body sitting upright against a tree. The child's eyes were open, glassy. No blood, no bruises. Leaves tucked carefully around his legs, almost lovingly. And above his head, carved into the bark, were 3 vertical lines, crossed by a single dark ring that looked burned into the wood. Jonah had seen ritual markings before, but this felt different. This wasn't worship. It was remembrance.
Maya came to the scene herself, against protocol. The sheriff told her to stay home, but she couldn't. She wanted to see, to know. When she saw the body, she didn't cry. She just stood there, pale and trembling, and said, "He's the 7th." Jonah blinked. 7th. She nodded. 6 others. Same place, same marks. We just stopped talking about it. Jonah stayed. He told himself it was for the paycheck, but that wasn't true. Something about the way Maya spoke, steady, angry, desperate, reminded him of every case he'd ever left unfinished. They met in her classroom late that night, maps and folders spread across desks covered in crayon drawings. Each disappearance was pinned to the same area, the edge of the old Crow logging zone, long abandoned after a fire 20 years ago. Maya traced the red circles with her finger. Each one who vanished lived near land that used to belong to Elias Crow. You know him? Jonah did. Everyone in town did. Crow owned half of Ashford Pines, the mills, the trucks, even the local radio station. A man who smiled too easily and always smelt faintly of oil and pine.
Jonah interviewed Crow the next morning. Crow was charming, practiced. He said the forest stories were just small-town folklore, that people got lost or ran away. He said there was no connection. But Jonah noticed the twitch in the man's jaw when he asked about the carvings, and the way his eyes flicked toward the window when Jonah mentioned the forest's edge. The days turned colder. By the time another person disappeared, a retired logger named Pavel, Panic rippled through the town. Pavel's house was left open, dinner half-eaten, TV still buzzing static. Jonah found a trail of muddy prints leading toward the woods, but they didn't belong to Pavel. They were smaller, barefoot. At the forest line, the prints stopped, and at the base of a tree, Jonah found a sliver of red fabric, the same thread as the mitten.
That night, he and Maya camped near the old stump field, a place locals avoided. It looked like a graveyard, an ocean of cut stumps under the moonlight. Maya told him about her brother, Oleg. He'd been one of the first to vanish. He worked at the mill, always out late. He used to joke that the trees whispered to him when he came home drunk, that they called his name. Maya's voice cracked. She said they never forget. The forest remembers everything that happens here. Jonah wanted to reassure her, to say grief makes us imagine things, but the words died in his throat, because just then the forest went silent, utterly silent. No wind, no crickets. Then came the sound, a slow, dragging scrape circling them. Something moved between the stumps, not an animal, not quite human either. A tall, pale shape, skin rough like bark, its face smooth and eyeless. Jonah's flashlight flickered, sputtered out. Maya clutched his arm, whispering, "Don't move." The figure stopped, turned its head slightly, then melted back into the trees. When Jonah finally dared to breathe, he saw what it left behind, a small hand-carved totem, half human, half tree, buried in the dirt.
In the morning, they found something waiting on Maya's doorstep, a mitten, the same red one from before, folded neatly. Inside it, a slip of paper. 3 words written in charcoal. You forgot him. The town was coming apart. Parents kept their children home. Workers refused to go near the forest. And Elias Crow? He was furious. He told Jonah to drop the case or leave town. That's when Jonah found the old records, hidden in a box behind the sheriff's desk. Yellowed newspaper clippings from 20 years ago. A fire at the mill. 12 workers trapped inside after management refused to halt production. Crow's father covered it up, said the fire was caused by worker negligence. But there was something else. A note from one of the survivors, scrawled in pencil, barely legible. We swore we'd never cut those woods again. The forest will keep count.
Jonah and Maya returned to the site of the old fire. Only charred foundations remained. The trees surrounding it were darker, older, their trunks thicker than any others nearby. The air there felt heavy. Jonah ran his hand across one of the trees. The bark was scarred, not from fire, but from carvings, hundreds of them. Lines, circles, symbols, layered and ancient. When he pressed his palm to it, the world seemed to hum beneath his skin. And for a second, he heard something, a breath, then a whisper. Remember. He stumbled back, shaken. Maya stood beside him, tears in her eyes. It's them. All the ones we forgot.
That night, they went to Crow's mansion. Jonah demanded answers. Crow denied everything, until Jonah pulled out the photos, the records, the old map. Then the man snapped. You don't understand. Without those trees, this town dies. Everyone eats because of me." He slammed his hand on the desk. "You can't make deals with a forest. It doesn't care." But his voice cracked halfway through, and for the first time, Jonah saw the fear behind his eyes. An hour later, the power in the mansion went out. Then came the sound. Not thunder, not wind. Something moving outside. They heard the glass shatter. The whispering began again. Dozens of voices, soft, layered, coming from the trees. Crow froze. Jonah turned to Maya. "Run!" But she didn't. She was staring through the window. A figure stood by the tree line, the same pale, bark-skinned being. Behind it, the forest swayed like it was breathing. The figure stepped forward, and the voices merged into one. "You took. You forgot. Remember." The walls trembled. The chandeliers swayed. Crow screamed as roots burst through the floor, wrapping around his legs, dragging him toward the window. Jonah tried to grab him, but the roots tightened, pulling him into the dark. The last thing they saw was his face pressed against the glass, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream, before he vanished into the earth. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The forest was still. Dawn. Ashford Pines was quiet again. The mansion was gone, just a hollow clearing where it had stood. The townspeople said it was a sinkhole, a freak collapse, but everyone knew better. They stopped logging that week. They built a memorial at the edge of the forest, 12 names carved into stone. And for the first time in decades, the forest seemed to sleep.
Weeks later, Jonah packed his bags. He told Maya he needed to leave, that some stories follow you if you stay too long. She smiled sadly and handed him something wrapped in cloth. The mitten. He almost refused it, but she said, "You'll know when to give it back." He drove for hours, until the trees thinned and the radio picked up a clear signal again. At a gas station on the highway, he emptied his pockets, phone, keys, wallet, and found something strange. A sliver of bark wrapped in the red mitten, 3 marks carved into it. Jonah stared at it for a long time, then tossed it into a trash can. But as he drove away, he glanced into the rearview mirror and froze. In the reflection, the trees behind the station seemed to lean toward the road, and on one of the trunks, faint but visible, a 4th mark had appeared.